Don't touch the console while I'm rerouting the primary buffers, all right. It's sensitive. Kalen didn't look up from the sparking panel he was wrestling with. His knuckles scraped raw against the scorched durasteel frame. The stray comet wasn't exactly factory new, and the recent escape from the Z-Krill slavers had left her sputtering like an old man after a zero-G sprint. He felt more than saw the alien woman shift behind him in the cramped cockpit. Felt the subtle change in air pressure, the faintest whiff of ozone and something else, something floral and sharp, like crushed spice leaves after a lightning strike. Her presence was a constant, low-level hum against his senses ever since he'd pulled her, half-conscious and spitting defiance from that slaver's cage 3 cycles ago. He'd expected gratitude, maybe, or suspicion. He hadn't expected this. This unnerving proximity, this silent observation. A cool pressure bloomed against the back of his neck, startlingly intimate. Fingers longer than human, tipped with what felt like smooth obsidian claws, yet surprisingly gentle, traced the line of his pulse. He flinched violently, jerking away and banging his head on the overhead conduit. Damn it, what did I just say about touching things? He whirled around, rubbing the sore spot. Lyrene stood barely an arm's length away, her large, obsidian eyes blinking slowly. Her skin, a pale, iridescent blue like moonlit water, shimmered with faint, internal light, swirling patterns of silver tracing unseen currents beneath the surface. A delicate fin, almost translucent, flared briefly behind her ear, catching the flickering emergency lights. "Your energy signature spikes erratically," she stated, her voice a low, resonant hum that vibrated pleasantly in his chest despite his irritation. She tilted her head, a gesture that made the fine, silvery tendrils framing her face drift like seaweed. "And your thermal regulation is inefficient, fluctuating." She gestured vaguely towards his neck. "Is this distress common for your species?" Kalen stared. Inefficient thermal regulation, distress. She just caressed his neck like she was checking a faulty power coupling. "It's called being startled," he snapped, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Humans don't generally appreciate strangers poking their vital points." He deliberately widened his stance, reclaiming his space. "Especially strangers who look like they could snap my neck with one hand." Her lips, a shade darker than her skin, curved slightly. Was that amusement? The silver patterns on her cheeks pulsed brighter. "My gratitude requires proximity. My vow demands understanding. How can I serve the one who freed me if I do not comprehend his vulnerabilities?" Kalen scrubbed a hand over his face, feeling the familiar prickle of exhaustion and annoyance. "Vow, right. The Cathar life-debt thing. Apparently, saving one meant you acquired a hyper-competent, overly curious, bioluminescent bodyguard who felt the need to analyze your sweat patterns. Look, Lyrene, I appreciate the sentiment, really. But the best way you can serve me right now is by sitting over there." He pointed to the co-pilot's chair, deliberately ignoring the faint scorch marks from her energy blade deflecting a blaster bolt during their escape, "and not touching anything. Especially me, got it?" She didn't move immediately, her gaze sweeping over him, lingering on the grease stains on his flight suit, the tension in his shoulders. The internal light within her skin seemed to dim slightly, the silver pattern slowing. "Your species prioritizes isolation even when mutually beneficial symbiosis is offered. We call it personal space," Kalen grumbled, turning back to the console, acutely aware of her gaze still on him. "And right now, I needed to figure out how to keep the Z-Krill from catching up and turning us both into nutrient paste or worse." The faint hum of her voice came from directly behind his shoulder again, making him jump. "Their pursuit vector is predictable. They rely on brute force, not finesse. We have approximately 3.7 standard cycles before they can recalibrate for our current trajectory, assuming your vessel maintains this velocity." He twisted his neck to glare at her. She was examining the navigation display over his shoulder, one of those dangerously elegant fingers hovering just above the screen. "How the hell do you know that?" She tapped the display lightly. The screen flickered, then stabilized, showing a complex projection of potential intercept paths. "I interfaced briefly with their ship's navigational AI during my extraction." A faint, dangerous glint flickered in her dark eyes. The silver patterns on her skin sharpened like ice crystals forming. Their security protocols are insultingly primitive. Kaelin stared at the tactical display she'd somehow conjured, then back at her. Gratitude? Vow. Maybe this symbiosis wasn't entirely without its perks. Still didn't mean he wanted her analyzing his pulse. Kaelin gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the tactical display Lyrene had summoned. Primitive or not, the Z-Krill had numbers and bigger guns. Okay, fine, you're useful. Still doesn't mean you get to poke me like a lab specimen. He tried to sound firm, but the proximity, the lingering scent of her, the way the light under her skin seemed to breathe, it was distracting. Deeply distracting. Lyrene retracted her hand from the console, the silver patterns on her skin softening back into slow swirls. Apologies. Cathar's sensory input is primarily tactile and proximal. Assessing physiological states through touch is instinctual, necessary for anticipating needs, coordinating action. She paused, her gaze direct and unnervingly perceptive. And for gauging truth, he snorted, turning back to wrestle with the damaged buffer coupling. Good luck gauging anything from me. I'm a closed book, locked vault, throw away the key. He finally got the coupling to seat, rewarded with a shower of yellow sparks that made him curse. Besides, your instincts nearly gave me a heart attack. A low chuckle, like stones rubbing together underwater, vibrated behind him. Your cardiac rhythm indicates resilience, not fragility, though the adrenaline spike was pronounced. He could practically feel her smirk. Is human humor always predicated on minor inflicted stress? Sometimes, he muttered, wiping sweat and grease from his forehead with the back of his hand. Depends on the human, depends on the inflictor. He risked a glance back. She was leaning against the bulkhead now, arms crossed beneath her breasts. The simple, dark fabric of her tunic clung in ways that highlighted the lithe strength beneath. Her tail, long and tipped with the same dark, fin-like membrane as the crest behind her ears, twitched almost imperceptibly against the deck plating. He hadn't really noticed the tail before, too focused on the glowing skin and the disconcerting eyes. It added another layer of alienness, yet somehow also emphasized her predatory grace. So, he said, trying to inject some normalcy into the situation, gesturing vaguely at her. Cathar, never run into your kind before, heard stories, warriors, honorable, prone to lifelong vows apparently. Her expression remained unreadable, but the light under her skin warmed slightly, shifting towards a soft gold at the edges of the blue. We value commitment. A life freely given merits a life freely protected. It is the core of our societal structure. Without such bonds, the Cathar would have succumbed to the void centuries ago. The void, he tightened the last bolt on the panel cover. Catchy name. What is it, a plague, cosmic horror? Lyrene's gaze drifted towards the viewport where stars streaked past in lines of white fire. The golden undertones in her skin deepened. It is entropy given form, isolation made manifest. The Z-Krill are merely scavengers feeding on the decay it leaves behind. My people fight against it, within and without. She looked back at him, her eyes seeming to pierce through his sarcastic defenses. Your rescue was not merely from enslavement, Kaelin. You pulled me from the edge of that, unraveling. There was a weight in her voice, a vulnerability that resonated beneath the stoic warrior facade. It caught him off guard, silencing his reflexive retort. He saw the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the way her controlled posture couldn't quite hide a deeper weariness. She wasn't just some alien Amazon playing bodyguard. She was a survivor, carrying burdens he couldn't yet fathom. Right, he said gruffly, feeling suddenly awkward. He slammed the panel shut. Well, glad I could help. He straightened up, needing to put distance between them again. Look, we need fuel and supplies. There's a scavenger outpost nebula side of the Corton Belt. Risky, but maybe the Z-Krill won't expect us to double back towards populated space. Lyrene pushed off from the bulkhead, moving with a silent fluidity that was mesmerizing. A logical gamble. Proximity to potential witnesses might deter their overt aggression, force them to rely on subtlety. They lack it. She stopped beside the co-pilot chair again, running a hand over the slightly singed armrest. This vessel requires significant repair beyond the buffers. Tell me something I don't know, Kaelin sighed, collapsing into the pilot's seat. The comet's held together by hope and rusty wire, but she's fast and she's mine. Lyrene settled into the other chair, her movements economical and precise. The cockpit felt even smaller with her there, her presence filling the space. Then we shall ensure she endures. As you ensured I endure. She turned her head, her profile outlined against the star-streaked viewport. The internal light pulsed softly. It is my purpose now. Kalen swallowed, the back of his neck tingling where her fingers had been. Purpose, vow, symbiosis. It all sounded terrifyingly permanent. And yet part of him, the part he kept locked down tight, felt a flicker of something other than annoyance. Curiosity, maybe. Intrigue, definitely. The scavenger outpost, designated Port Nowhere by its transient inhabitants, clung to the shadowed side of a cracked asteroid like a cluster of metallic barnacles. It bristled with jury-rigged sensor arrays and docking clamps, a haven for those who preferred to operate outside the guild's watchful eyes. Kalen brought the stray comet in low and fast, dodging drifting debris and deactivated orbital mines. Lyrene watched the asteroid field approach, her eyes narrowed, the patterns on her skin shifting rapidly through shades of violet and deep blue, a silent assessment of potential threats. Stealth systems engaged, Kalen muttered, his hands dancing over the controls. Minimal power signatures. We dock, get the fuel cells and protein packs, and we're out. No chatter, no lingering. The energy signatures emanating from the station are chaotic, Lyrene observed, her voice a low hum. Multiple species, overlapping frequencies, high probability of illicit activities and potential conflict. Welcome to Port Nowhere, Kalen said dryly. Keep your pointy bits ready just in case. He glanced at her. She wasn't wearing the energy blade he'd seen her use against the Z-Krill, but the way she held herself spoke of coiled readiness. Her gaze met his, a spark of something challenge, understanding, flashing in their dark depths. My pointy bits are always ready, Kalen. As is my commitment to your safety. The docking clamps engaged with a jarring thud. Kalen cut the main engines, plunging the cockpit into the dim glow of backup lighting. All right, standard procedure. I go out, handle the transaction. You stay here, keep the engines warm, and if anything bigger than a space rat looks at the ship funny, you make it regret its life choices. Clear. Lyrene uncoiled from the seat with that unsettling grace. Perfectly. However, my vow encompasses proactive protection. Allowing you to venture alone into a potentially hostile environment contradicts its core principle. Kalen groaned inwardly. Look, we need to blend in. I look like every other down-on-his-luck spacer here. You, he gestured vaguely at her glowing skin, her elegant alien features, the subtle fin crest. You stand out, like a supernova in a coal bin, that attracts attention we don't need. She tilted her head, the silver tendrils drifting. Are you suggesting my appearance is a liability? I'm suggesting it's conspicuous, he amended quickly, seeing the faint sharpening of the patterns on her temples. Unfamiliar species draw eyes, eyes lead to questions, questions lead to trouble, her lips thinned. My people are not accustomed to hiding. Yeah, well, my people are masters at it, especially when we're broke and running from slavers. Stay, please. He tried to inject sincerity into the plea, hopping to bypass the whole vow protocol. For a moment she just watched him, her expression unreadable. The internal light seemed to gather around her hands, coalescing into brighter points at her fingertips. Then she gave a slight, sharp nod. Very well, I will remain, but if your biosignature indicates elevated distress for longer than 7.3 centicycles, I will intervene, regardless of conspicuousness. Kalen let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Fine, 7.4 centicycles. Don't start the clock until I'm actually off the ship. He grabbed his battered synth leather jacket and slung it on. Comms channel open, emergency frequency only. He hesitated at the airlock door, looking back at her. In the dim light she looked ethereal and dangerous, a creature woven from shadow and starlight. The urge to say something else, something less sarcastic, flickered within him. He crushed it. Don't break my ship while I'm gone. The outer airlock hissed open, revealing the grimy, bustling docking bay of Port Nowhere. Kalen stepped out, pulling his collar up, melting into the crowd of rough-looking spacers, droids, and aliens of a dozen different shapes and sizes. The air tasted stale, thick with the smells of engine oil, recycled oxygen, and cheap synthale. He kept his head down, heading for the supply depot, acutely aware of the invisible timer Lyrene had probably started in her head. He hated this feeling, the reliance, the connection, the sense that his survival was suddenly tangled up with hers. He'd always worked alone, trusted only himself and the comet. This symbiosis felt like a cage of a different kind. But as he navigated the crowded, dimly lit corridors, dodging a stumbling Rigelian smuggler and ignoring the proposition whispered by a shadowy figure in an alcove, a different thought surfaced. He wasn't entirely alone out here. Back on his ship, a deadly, glowing alien warrior was watching his back, ready to tear apart anyone who threatened him. It was a strangely comforting thought. Annoying, complicated, but comforting. The fuel transaction went smoothly enough, handled by a surly porcine alien who seemed more interested in counting credits than asking questions. Kalen haggled fiercely for the protein packs, his usual caustic banter feeling forced. His senses felt heightened, constantly scanning the periphery, listening for any shift in the station's low thrum, half expecting Lyrene's promised intervention at any moment. He felt exposed. Vulnerable in a way he hadn't since his early days running scavenged parts on backwater moons. It was the awareness of her, back on the comet, waiting, worrying. Did Cathar worry? Or did they just calculate probabilities of distress? He slung the bag of nutrient bars and the heavy fuel cell canister over his shoulder, turning back towards the docking bay. That was when he saw them. Two figures detaching themselves from the shadows near the comet's docking ring. Not Z-Krill, these were leaner, clad in dark, form-fitting envirosuits, their faces obscured by polarized visors. Bounty hunters, guild enforcers, didn't matter. They were moving purposefully towards his ship. His blood ran cold, Lyrene. He broke into a run, shoving past startled spacers. "Hey, get away from that ship!" The figures paused, turning towards him. One raised a hand, palm out, displaying a sigil Kalen didn't recognize, swirling lines around a central, jagged shape. Not guild. Something else. Something that felt older, colder. Kalen, designated pilot, the figure's voice was electronically filtered, devoid of inflection. "We are here for the Cathar fugitive. Surrender her and you may depart unharmed." Fugitive, not rescued slave, but fugitive. What hadn't Lyrene told him? "She's not a fugitive," Kalen yelled back, trying to buy time, edging closer. His hand instinctively went to the sidearm holstered under his jacket. It felt pitifully inadequate. "She's protection." The second figure chuckled, a dry, rasping sound through the filter. "Protection? Your vessel barely holds pressure, human. What can you offer against the Wardens of Zin?" Wardens of Zin. Never heard of them, but they radiated a quiet menace that was far more chilling than the Z-Krill's brute force. The first warden tilted its head. "The Cathar known as Lyrene violated sacred accords. She abandoned her post, her sworn duty. She is forfeit. Stand aside." Abandoned her post. Sacred accords. This painted a very different picture from the one Lyrene had implied. Kalen's mind raced. Was the life debt vow just a manipulation? A way to secure a pilot and a ship for her escape? His gut tightened with suspicion and a surprising sting of betrayal. But then he remembered her face when she spoke of the void, the weariness in her eyes. He remembered the scorch marks on the co-pilot chair where she'd saved his ship, maybe his life. "No," Kalen said, his voice steadier than he felt. He drew his blaster. "She stays with me." The wardens didn't even flinch. The first one raised its hand again, fingers splaying. Energy crackled between them, coalescing into a shimmering blue-white field. A regrettable choice. Before the warden could unleash whatever energy blast it was forming, the comet's boarding ramp slammed down with concussive force. Lyrene stood silhouetted against the ship's interior light, energy shimmering around her own hands, brighter, fiercer. Her skin blazed with incandescent silver and electric blue patterns, sharp and angular like lightning forks. Her eyes were pools of white fire. "Wardens," her voice resonated with power, echoing slightly in the docking bay. "You trespass. This vessel and its pilot are under my protection by right of salvage and life debt. Stand down or face Cathar justice." The first warden lowered its hand slightly, the energy field flickering. "Lyrene, you disgrace our lineage, forsaking the vigil for this." Visor swept contemptuously over Kalen and the battered ship. "He freed me when our own protocols would have left me to the Z-Krill and the Void's embrace." Lyrene retorted, stepping fully onto the ramp, her tail lashing behind her. The air crackled with tension. My vow holds. He is mine to defend. Kalen stared, blaster still raised but momentarily forgotten. Mine to defend. The possessiveness in her voice, the sheer defiant power radiating from her, sent an unexpected jolt through him. It wasn't calculation or manipulation he saw in her stance. It was raw, protective fury. The second warden took a step forward. Your sentiment is irrelevant. The law, it didn't finish. Lyrene moved, a blur of iridescent blue and silver. She didn't use a weapon, just slammed into the warden with impossible speed and force. There was a sickening crunch of metal and plasteel as the warden flew backward, crashing into a stack of cargo containers. The first warden reacted instantly, firing a beam of disruptive energy. Kalen fired his blaster simultaneously, his shot going wide as Lyrene twisted, the beam shearing past her, scorching the deck plating where she'd stood. She pivoted, striking upwards with an open palm. A wave of pure kinetic force slammed into the first warden, sending it staggering back against the bulkhead. "Get on the ship, Kalen," Lyrene yelled, not looking at him, her focus entirely on the recovering wardens. He didn't need telling twice. He scrambled up the ramp, throwing the supplies inside as Lyrene backed towards the entrance, her hands alight, keeping the stunned wardens at bay. The moment he was clear, she hit the ramp control. It slammed shut, sealing them inside just as another energy beam splashed against the outer hull. The comet shuddered. "Get us out of here," Lyrene's voice was tight, strained. The brilliant light radiating from her skin flickered, dimming slightly, the sharp patterns softening into chaotic swirls. She leaned heavily against the sealed airlock door, breathing hard. Kalen was already in the pilot's seat, hands flying across the console, bypassing safety checks, pouring power into the engines. Working on it, what the hell were those things? Wardens, sacred accords, fugitive. Questions tumbled out, fueled by adrenaline and the lingering suspicion the wardens had planted. The stray comet lurched as the docking clamps released prematurely, protesting with screeching metal. He slammed the throttle forward, weaving the ship recklessly through the asteroid field's exit corridor. Lyrene pushed herself away from the door, moving stiffly towards the co-pilot chair. The glow beneath her skin was fading rapidly, leaving it looking almost translucent, revealing the fine network of veins beneath. Exhaustion was etched onto her features. They are enforcers, keepers of ancient Cathar traditions. The vigil is a duty held by certain bloodlines. She sank into the seat, wincing. A duty I could no longer uphold. Kalen risked a glance at her. She looked drained, vulnerable. The fierce warrior who had faced down two terrifying opponents moments ago seemed diminished. "Why? What duty? And why didn't you tell me?" His voice was sharper than he intended. Her head snapped up, a spark of defiance returning to her eyes, though the light in her skin remained dim. "My past is complex, Kalen, dangerous. I shared what was necessary for you to understand the immediate threat, the Zekrill, my vow. And the fact that your own people might be hunting you wasn't relevant." He banked the ship hard around a large chunk of rock, the inertial dampeners groaning. "Seems like a pretty major detail to omit. Telling you would have endangered you further." She shot back, her voice gaining strength. The glow flickered, pulsing faintly with agitated violet hues. "The wardens operate under laws that transcend guild space. Their reach is long. Knowing my history makes you a target by association, not just circumstance." "I am a target by circumstance," Kalen retorted, yanking the hyperspace lever. The starfield outside warped, stretching into streaks of blue and white as the comet plunged into the tween-space dimension. "Because I rescued you. And apparently you weren't just some random prisoner." Lyrene fell silent, her gaze fixed on the swirling vortex outside the viewport. The dim light in the cockpit reflected in her dark eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was low, stripped of its earlier resonance. "I was a sentinel of the outer rim, tasked with guarding weakening points in the fabric of reality where the void seeks entry." She traced a pattern on the armrest with a fingertip. "Zekrill attacked my outpost during a critical phase. My support detail was lost. Protocol dictated self-termination to prevent capture and potential psychic interrogation that could reveal weaknesses in the veil." Kalen stared at her profile, the hyperspace tunnel reflecting in her irises. self-termination. You were supposed to kill yourself. The words felt thick, wrong. She nodded curtly, still not looking at him. Capture meant compromising everything my lineage has protected for millennia. But when faced with oblivion, I hesitated, I fought, and then you arrived. She finally turned to face him, her expression stark. Your arrival defied protocol, defied probability. It offered an alternative, escape, survival, but it also meant abandoning my post, breaking my oath to the vigil. To my people, I am worse than a fugitive. I am a failure, an oath breaker. The raw self-condemnation in her voice hit him harder than the warden's energy blast. He saw it now, the conflict warring within her, the shame beneath the pride, the desperation masked by the vow. She hadn't lied, not exactly. She'd omitted the parts that painted her not as a victim but as something far more complicated. So the vow to me, he started, unsure how to phrase it. Is it real, or just a way to justify breaking the other one? The light under her skin flared suddenly, a painful-looking surge of deep crimson that pulsed like a raw wound. Her eyes flashed. The life debt is sacred. It is the only honor I have left. You saved me from the Z-Krill, yes, but also from the void and from the failure of my own resolve. My service to you is not justification, Kaelin. It is penance. It is purpose. It is real. The intensity of her declaration vibrated through the small cockpit. He saw the moisture gleaming in her eyes, tears, or just the strange physiology of her species. It didn't matter. He believed her. The guarded suspicion in his chest eased, replaced by a complex mix of empathy and something else, something that felt dangerously close to protectiveness. He reached out, hesitated, then awkwardly patted her shoulder. Her skin felt cool beneath his palm, the faint thrum of energy still present but subdued. Okay, he said softly. Okay, I get it, sort of. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into the touch slightly, a small, almost imperceptible movement. The crimson flare under her skin slowly subsided, leaving behind the pale, weary blue. Your methods of reassurance are blunt, she murmured, her voice rough, but not unwelcome. They flew on in silence for a long moment, the only sound the low hum of the hyperspace drive. The chaotic energy of the escape, the fight, the argument seemed to drain away, leaving a fragile quiet in its wake. Kaelin kept his hand on her shoulder, feeling the slight tremor running through her. Oathbreaker, sentinel, fugitive, warrior, woman. Lyrene was all of those things, and she was here with him. The thought wasn't nearly as annoying as it should have been. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the thrum of the drive core resonating through the deck plates. Kaelin eventually pulled his hand back from Lyrene's shoulder, the lingering coolness of her skin a phantom sensation on his palm. He focused on the nav computer, plotting a course through less trafficked hyperspace lanes, trying to shake the image of her facing down the wardens, ablaze with fierce, protective light. Penance, purpose, real. Her words echoed in his mind. He cleared his throat. So, wardens. Are they likely to just give up? Lyrene stirred, straightening in her seat. The dim glow beneath her skin had stabilized into a soft, steady azure, though she still looked pale. No, they are relentless, bound by duty much as I was, she sighed, a sound like shifting sand. They will analyze our jump signature, track our potential vectors. They are skilled hunters. Great, Kaelin muttered. First slavers, now cosmic hall monitors with energy whips. Can't catch a break. He input a command, diverting more power to the rear sensors. Any weaknesses, besides getting punched really hard? A faint smile touched Lyrene's lips, the first genuine one he thought he'd seen. It transformed her face, softening the regal lines, hinting at a warmth beneath the warrior's reserve. Their focus is singular. They anticipate threats according to Cathar doctrine, energy weapons, psychic probes, ritual combat. They may not anticipate unpredictability. Unpredictability is my middle name, Kaelin said, feeling a bit of his usual swagger return. Or it would be if my parents had been particularly weird. Lyrene tilted her head, the analytical look returning, but this time softened with curiosity. Human naming conventions are varied. Is unpredictability a common familial designation? He chuckled. No, it's an expression. It means I'm good at thinking on my feet, doing the unexpected. Ah. Improvisation based on situational variables, she nodded slowly. A useful trait. Perhaps your species' lack of rigid adherence to protocol is not always a deficiency. See, we're not so bad. Inefficient thermal regulation aside. He grinned at her. She met his gaze, and the air in the cockpit shifted again, thickening with an awareness that had nothing to do with wardens or hyperspace. Her eyes seemed darker, deeper, the faint light within them swirling like nebulas. The silver tendrils framing her face drifted slightly, catching the dim light. He remembered the feel of her fingers on his neck, the jolt of unexpected intimacy. He remembered the possessive fire in her voice. He is mine to defend. His own pulse quickened, a purely human reaction, probably spiking his energy signature all over again. Lyrine's gaze flickered down to his mouth, then back to his eyes. The azure glow of her skin deepened slightly, warming towards violet where it met the darker fabric of her tunic. He could almost feel the heat radiating from her, or maybe that was just his imagination running wild. This was insane. She was an alien warrior fugitive, bound to him by some cosmic life debt he barely understood. He was a cynical spacer trying to keep his ship flying and his skin intact. Getting involved was monumentally stupid. And yet, the way she looked at him right now, the vulnerability warring with strength, the alien grace combined with a raw, tangible presence, it was intoxicating. He leaned slightly towards her, drawn by an invisible current. Lyrine mirrored the movement, her breath hitching almost silently. Her scent, ozone and crushed spice leaves, seemed to intensify. He saw the pulse beating faintly at the base of her throat where the iridescent skin was thinnest. Closer. Her lips parted slightly. He could feel the static charge in the air between them, the friction of unspoken desire. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, wanting to touch the glowing skin, trace the silver patterns, feel the life humming beneath. A klaxon suddenly blared, shattering the moment. Red lights flashed across the console. Proximity alert, Kalen swore, snapping back into pilot mode, adrenaline surging for an entirely different reason. Something just dropped out of hyperspace right on top of us. On the main view screen, a ship materialized, sleek, black, knife-edged. No markings Kalen recognized, but its design screamed predator. It wasn't the warden's vessel. This was something else, something fast and heavily armed. Lyrine was instantly alert, her weariness vanishing, the light under her skin flaring bright silver again. "It matches Z-Krill energy signatures," she said, her voice sharp. "But the configuration, it's modified, faster, more weapons." "Looks like they upgraded," Kalen gritted out, yanking the comet into a hard, evasive dive as emerald energy bolts lanced through the space where they'd been seconds before. "Must really want you back." "Or," Lyrine murmured, her eyes fixed on the pursuing ship, her expression grim, "they want to ensure my knowledge never reaches anyone else." The ship shuddered as a glancing blow impacted the aft shields. Kalen wrestled with the controls, the thrill of the chase momentarily eclipsing the memory of the almost kiss. Almost. "Shields down to 40%. Kalen yelled over the shriek of protesting metal and the thud of weapons fire impacting the hull. The Z-Krill ship clung to their tail, matching every desperate maneuver he threw the comet into. Emerald energy bolts stitched across the void, forcing him to constantly jink and weave. "They're anticipating our moves." "How?" Lyrine's hands flew over the co-pilot console, her fingers blurring as she rerouted power, boosted shield harmonics, and scanned the enemy vessel. The light under her skin was a brilliant, almost blinding silver white, pulsing with focused intensity. "They have an adapted Cathar predictive algorithm," she bit out, her voice tight with concentration. "Likely extracted from one of their previous captives. It analyzes microshifts in our drive signature to anticipate course corrections." "Can you counter it?" Kalen swerved hard to port, narrowly avoiding a collision with a rogue chunk of hyperspace debris dragged along in their wake. Alarms screamed from half a dozen panels. "Maybe," she replied, her brow furrowed. "But I need direct access to their tactical network. A data spike, it requires proximity." Kalen glanced at the tactical display. The Z-Krill ship was practically riding their engine wash. "We couldn't get much closer without swapping paint." "Closer," Lyrine insisted. She pointed towards a swirling anomaly ahead, a pocket of unstable tween space. "There, a gravimetric shear. If you can pilot us through the narrowest point, their ship will be forced into near contact to follow. It should create an opening." Kalen stared at the roiling chaos on the screen, Flying through that was suicide or genius, probably both. That thing could tear the comet apart. Our shields are failing, Kaelin, Lyrene said, her voice calm despite the chaos. Their weapons will tear us apart sooner, trust me. He looked at her then, really looked. The fierce concentration, the absolute certainty in her gaze, the way the light seemed to pour from her. He remembered her facing the wardens, her vow echoing in the docking bay. Trust me. He took a deep breath. All right, warrior woman, hang on. He angled the comet directly towards the swirling vortex of the gravimetric shear. The ship bucked and groaned as they hit the outer turbulence. Warning lights flashed like a manic nebula. Through the viewport, space itself seemed to twist and fold. Lyrene's hands were braced against the console, her knuckles white, but her eyes were fixed on the Z-Krill ship closing rapidly behind them. Now, Kaelin, maintained steady course through the apex. He fought the controls, the ship screaming in protest as tidal forces tried to rip it in opposing directions. The Z-Krill ship, caught in the same gravimetric trap, surged alongside them, so close he could see the ugly, segmented plating of its hull. Directly alongside, Lyrene commanded. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, and the light emanating from her intensified, focusing into searing beams that shot from her fingertips, not towards the enemy ship, but into the comet's own comms array. Kaelin felt a strange resonance through the deck plates, a high-frequency hum that vibrated in his bones. Data spike deployed, Lyrene breathed, opening her eyes. They glowed with residual power. Their tactical net is chaotic, overloaded. On the tactical display, the Z-Krill ship suddenly veered erratically, its weapons fire ceasing. It tumbled away from the shear's edge, caught in the unstable currents. Kaelin punched the throttle, pushing the battered comet through the dissipating edge of the anomaly and back into relatively stable tween space. He risked a glance back. The Z-Krill ship was spinning helplessly, disappearing into the turbulent wake. He let out a whoop of pure relief, slumping back in his seat, his hands shaking slightly. Holy stars, Lyrene, you did it. Whatever the hell you did it. She gave him a weary but triumphant smile. The intense light began to recede, draining from her skin, leaving her looking pale and depleted again, even more so than after the encounter with the wardens. She swayed in her seat, one hand going to her temple. The direct neural interface is taxing. Kaelin immediately unstrapped himself and moved towards her, his earlier irritation and suspicion forgotten, replaced by a wave of concern and something akin to awe. Hey, easy. He reached her just as she slumped sideways, catching her before she fell. Her body felt strangely light, yet dense with energy like holding captured lightning. Her skin was cool now, the glow almost entirely faded except for faint traces around her eyes and fingertips. He supported her weight, easing her back against the seat. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her breathing shallow. The silvery tendrils brushed against his cheek, sending a jolt through him that had nothing to do with residual energy discharge. She felt fragile in his arms, a stark contrast to the power she'd unleashed moments before. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart against his hand where it rested on her back. Or maybe that was his own pulse hammering in his ears. He gently brushed a stray tendril from her face. Her eyes fluttered open, locking with his. They were dark obsidian again, deep and vast, reflecting the dim cockpit lights. The intensity of the Z-Krill chase, the shared danger, the adrenaline high, Lyrene's incredible display of power, and now this. Her leaning against him, vulnerable, her gaze holding his, it broke through the last of his reservations. The air crackled, thick with unspoken tension, the near miss forgotten, replaced by an imminent collision of a different kind. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Instead, her hand came up, cool fingers tracing the line of his jaw, sending shivers down his spine. Her touch was hesitant, questioning, yet charged with a possessive energy that mirrored the claim she'd made to the wardens. Mine. He closed the distance. Her lips were cool at first, then warmed rapidly under his, startlingly soft against the slight roughness of his own. The taste of her was alien yet intoxicating, ozone, that faint spice, and something uniquely Lyrene, a subtle sweetness like exotic nectar. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was fueled by adrenaline, by the near-death escape, by the weeks of simmering tension and unspoken attraction cooped up in the small ship. It was desperate, demanding, a collision of two disparate beings finding an unexpected point of contact. Kaelin's hand slid from her back, tangling in the silvery tendrils near her ear, pulling her closer. He felt the faint thrum of energy returning beneath her skin as she responded, her initial hesitancy melting into a fierce, possessive heat. Her other hand clamped onto his shoulder, fingers digging in with surprising strength, anchoring him. The kiss deepened, tongues exploring tentatively, then with growing confidence. It was a discovery, mapping unfamiliar territory, learning the shape and texture of each other. He felt the subtle flare of a fin behind her ear brush against his cheek, a reminder of her alienness that only heightened the intimacy. She made a low sound in her throat, a resonant hum that vibrated through his chest, igniting a fire deep within him. The faint azure glow returned to her skin, bathing them both in soft, ethereal light, pulsing in time with her quickening breath. He broke the kiss, needing air, resting his forehead against hers. They were both breathing heavily, the small space of the cockpit suddenly feeling charged, electric. Her obsidian eyes searched his, wide and luminous in the dim light. The warrior, the sentinel, the fugitive, all those facets were still there, but overlaid now with a raw vulnerability, a mirrored need that resonated with his own guarded heart. "Kaelin," she breathed, her voice husky. Her fingers tightened on his shoulder. He traced the glowing pattern swirling on her cheekbone with his thumb. "Lyrene." Just saying her name felt intimate, acknowledging the reality of her, of this moment stripped bare of sarcasm and defenses. He could feel the Cathar energy buzzing faintly under her skin, a tangible current that seemed to respond to his touch, the glow brightening slightly where his thumb rested. It wasn't just physical, it felt deeper, like touching her essence. He kissed her again, slower this time, exploring the curve of her neck, the delicate ridge of her collarbone visible above the tunic. Her skin felt like cool silk infused with latent heat. She arched into his touch, her own hands exploring the contours of his back, the rough fabric of his jacket a contrast to her smooth skin. Her touch was analytical yet possessive, learning his shape, his vulnerabilities, claiming him in a way that went beyond her vow. The kiss became a heated exchange, a dance of dominance and surrender. She nipped at his lower lip, a playful, predatory gesture that sent a fresh wave of heat through him. He retaliated, capturing her lip between his teeth gently, rewarded by another low hum and the tightening of her grip. He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "Your vow," he murmured, needing to understand. "Is this part of the service?" A flicker of hurt, quickly masked, crossed her features. The glow dimmed momentarily. "Is that what you think?" she whispered, her voice tight. "That this is obligation?" He immediately regretted the question, the ingrained cynicism rising at the worst possible moment. "No, I don't know what I think. This is new territory." Her gaze softened, the light returning, warmer this time, tinged with gold. "For me as well." She leaned forward, brushing her lips against his again, a feather-light touch that promised more. "The vow compels protection, loyalty, understanding. It does not compel this." Her fingers traced the pulse point on his neck, the same spot she'd touched when they first met, but this time the gesture was achingly tender. "This is separate, unforeseen, that resonated. Nothing about Lyrene had been foreseen. She was a disruption, a complication, a force of nature that had crashed into his solitary existence. And right now, tangled together in the aftermath of battle, bathed in the soft glow of her alien skin, he didn't want to foresee anything else. He wanted this. He wanted her. He pulled her closer, deepening the kiss, pouring all the pent-up loneliness, the fear, the unexpected hope into it. Her response was immediate, fierce, meeting his need with her own complex blend of warrior strength and startling tenderness. The small confines of the cockpit seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, lost in the intoxicating discovery of each other, the hum of the drive core a distant counterpoint to the pounding of their hearts. The journey through hyperspace became a blur of shared moments, stolen touches, and deepening intimacy, punctuated by the constant low-level anxiety of potential pursuit. Kaelin found himself watching Lyrene constantly, fascinated by the subtle shifts in her bioluminescence. The way patterns would swirl and change with her thoughts and emotions, tightening into sharp silver lines when she focused on sensor readings, softening into warm gold when she smiled at one of his bad jokes, deepening to violet when she recounted fragments of Cathar lore or the stark beauty of the void she had guarded. They talked for hours, peeling back layers of ingrained habit and cultural misunderstanding. He learned about the Cathar reverence for resonance and connection, their fear of the great silence of the void, the intricate social structures built around vows and shared energy. She learned about human impulsiveness, our strange capacity for both cruelty and self-sacrifice, our fascination with fleeting beauty and illogical hope. Her curiosity was insatiable, her questions about human physiology, emotions, and history often leaving him struggling for answers. She'd touch his hand while asking about laughter, her own skin glowing softly, as if trying to absorb the concept through proximity. Or trace the lines on his palm while questioning the human need for physical keepsakes, her gaze intense and analytical, yet strangely gentle. The physical connection, ignited in the cockpit after the Z-Krill attack, flared easily between them. Kisses became longer, deeper. Touches lingered, charged with unspoken promises. The cramped confines of the comet forced a constant proximity that amplified the tension, turning mundane tasks like sharing nutrient packs or checking star charts into moments fraught with awareness. He'd brush past her in the narrow corridor leading to the engine room, the brief contact sending sparks along his nerves, her answering glow a silent acknowledgement. One cycle, while Kalen was trying to repair a stubbornly offline atmospheric recycler, Lyrene had joined him in the cramped access crawlspace. She watched him work, her usual analytical gaze softened. When he'd cursed, banging his knuckles for the dozenth time, she'd reached out, her cool fingers closing over his bruised hand. "Allow me," she murmured. Before he could protest, a soft blue light emanated from her palm, flowing into his skin. The pain subsided instantly, replaced by a soothing warmth. He stared at their joined hands, her glowing skin against his grease-stained knuckles. "How?" "Minor cellular regeneration," she explained simply, her thumb stroking the back of his hand. "A basic Cathar application of bioenergy. We use it to mend tissues, ease pain, strengthen bonds." Her eyes met his, the implication hanging in the air. Strengthen bonds. He didn't pull his hand away. Instead, he turned his palm up, lacing his fingers through hers. Her grip tightened, the blue light pulsing gently between them, a silent conversation that transcended words. The intimacy was intoxicating, but also terrifying. He felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling, the isolation he'd cultivated for years dissolving under the warmth of her presence, the intensity of her focus. He was falling for her hard and fast, an alien warrior fugitive with cosmic baggage and enemies on her tail. It was the stupidest, most dangerous thing he could possibly do, and he couldn't seem to stop himself. Lyrene, too, seemed caught in the undertow. The rigid control she maintained, the burden of her broken oath and uncertain future, seemed to ease when they were close. He saw glimpses of playfulness emerge. A sudden, unexpected shove when he was off balance, followed by a resonant chuckle, the way her tail would sometimes twitch with amusement when he was being particularly sarcastic. But beneath the growing affection, the shadow of their pursuers remained. Every unidentified ship signature on the long-range sensors sent a jolt of anxiety through them. Every unexplained hyperspace ripple made them exchange wary glances. The wardens hadn't shown themselves again, and the Z-Krill seemed to have fallen back after Lyrene's data spike, but the feeling of being hunted persisted. They needed a refuge, somewhere to lie low, repair the comet properly, and figure out their next move. Kalen knew a place, a forgotten moon orbiting a gas giant in an uncharted system, home to ancient ruins rumored to predate most known galactic civilizations. Risky, isolated, but potentially defensible. And far off any warden or Z-Krill patrol routes. "Xylos," he said one cycle, pointing to a barely discernible marker on his oldest star chart. "Used to be a pilgrimage site for some extinct species. Now it's just ruins and dust. But there's breathable atmosphere, water, and enough salvageable tech scattered around to potentially mask our energy signature." Lyrene studied the chart, her brow furrowed. The patterns on her skin shifted, analyzing, calculating. Isolation offers temporary safety, she agreed finally. But it also means no support if they find us. We'll be each other's support, Kalen said, meeting her gaze. The intensity in his own voice surprised him. He meant it. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Lyrene held his gaze for a long moment, the light within her softening to a warm, steady gold. Together, she echoed, the words sealing a promise far deeper than any formal vow. The moon Xylos was a breathtaking desolation. Vast, cyclopean ruins of obsidian-like stone clawed at the thin, lavender sky, their surfaces etched with geometric patterns that seemed to hum with dormant energy. A pair of gigantic, shattered rings hung in orbit, remnants of some ancient celestial engineering project, casting long, moving shadows across the landscape. Kalen landed the comet carefully within the relative shelter of a collapsed archway, the scale of the surrounding structures making his ship look like a child's toy. The air, when they cautiously opened the ramp, was thin but breathable, carrying the scent of dust, ionized rock, and something else, a faint metallic tang that hinted at the strange energy still resonating within the ruins. "Impressive," Lyrene murmured, stepping out onto the dusty ground, her gaze sweeping across the immense structures. Her skin glowed a soft turquoise, mirroring the alien sky, the patterns shifting with curiosity and a touch of awe. These energy signatures, they are incredibly ancient, predate the Cathar expansion by millennia. Local legends call it the graveyard of architects, Kalen said, running a diagnostic scanner over the ship's hull. The damage from the Z-Krill attack was significant but repairable, given time and salvaged parts. No one knows who built this place or why they left. They spent the next few cycles working side by side, scavenging components from derelict Zalosian tech, strange crystalline power conduits, resonating metal plates, oddly shaped interface sockets. Kalen's technical skills combined surprisingly well with Lyrene's innate understanding of energy systems. She could sense flaws in circuits, coax power from dormant devices, and interface with the alien technology in ways that baffled him, her hands glowing as she channeled energy. The shared work forged a new level of comfort between them. The constant threat receded slightly in the silent majesty of the ruins. They fell into a rhythm, scavenging during the dim lavender daylight, repairing the comet under the eerie glow of the gas giant looming in the night sky, sharing quiet meals, and talking late into the cycle, huddled together for warmth against the chilling night air in the ship's small cabin. The physical intimacy deepened, evolving beyond the frantic heat of their first encounters into something slower, more exploratory, profoundly connected. Making love under the alien sky, surrounded by the silent ruins, felt both primal and sacred. Lyrene's bioluminescence became an extension of their shared pleasure, her skin flushing with vibrant color, patterns swirling and intensifying with her arousal, bathing them in shifting light. Her touch, sometimes analytical, sometimes fiercely possessive, always left him feeling utterly seen, exposed in a way that was both thrilling and terrifyingly vulnerable. She learned the contours of his body, the places that made him gasp or shudder, with the same focused intensity she applied to star charts or energy conduits. He, in turn, discovered the sensitivity of the fins behind her ears, the way tracing the patterns on her skin could elicit that low, resonant hum, the surprising strength hidden in her seemingly delicate frame. Their lovemaking was a conversation in touch and sensation, bridging the gap between their species, finding a common language in shared pleasure and burgeoning emotion. One night, lying tangled together on the narrow bunk after hours of slow, languid exploration, Lyrene traced the faded scar on Kalen's side, a memento from a pirate skirmish years ago. Her touch was light, inquisitive. "This vessel you inhabit," she murmured, her voice soft in the darkness, her skin emitting a gentle, golden glow that illuminated his face. "It carries many stories of survival." Kalen caught her hand, bringing her cool fingers to his lips. "Just like yours." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been lingering in the back of his mind. "The vigil, the post you abandoned. Do you regret leaving?" Lyrene went still, the golden glow dimming slightly. She looked past him towards the viewport where the gas giant swirled in hues of orange and purple. "I regret the necessity," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I regret the failure to uphold my oath." But she turned her gaze back to him, her dark eyes searching his. "Staying would have meant oblivion. Leaving led me to you." She touched his cheek, her fingers trembling slightly. "I do not regret you, Kaelin." The raw honesty in her voice cracked something open inside him, washing away the last vestiges of his cynicism, his fear of entanglement. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her unique scent. "I don't regret you either, Lyrene," he whispered against her skin. "Gods help me, I don't." In the quiet solitude of the ancient ruins, surrounded by the ghosts of a long-dead civilization, they found a fragile peace, a deepening connection that felt more real, more vital than any vow or protocol. But even in the heart of the graveyard of architects, the shadows of their past and the uncertainty of their future stretched long. They knew the peace was temporary, a borrowed moment before the inevitable return of the forces hunting them. Yet clinging to each other in the alien night, they chose to embrace the present, finding strength and solace in their unforeseen, improbable bond. The repairs on the stray comet were nearly complete. Kaelin had managed to integrate some of the salvaged Zalosian tech, reinforcing the shields and boosting the engine efficiency. Lyrene had purged the last remnants of the Z-Krill predictive algorithm from their systems and subtly altered the ship's energy signature, hopping to make them harder to track. They worked with a quiet efficiency born of shared purpose and deepening intimacy. The easy banter, the casual touches, the moments of quiet understanding, it all felt natural now, inevitable. Kaelin found himself anticipating her needs, handing her the right tool before she asked, catching her eye across the engine room and sharing a silent smile. She, in turn, seemed attuned to his moods, offering quiet comfort when frustration mounted, her presence a steadying anchor. One evening, as Kaelin finalized the shield calibrations, Lyrene approached him, holding out a small, intricately carved piece of the obsidian-like Zalosian stone. It pulsed with a faint internal light, resonating with a low hum. "I adapted this," she said, pressing it into his hand. "It felt warm, alive. It's attuned to my biosignature. If we are ever separated, activate it. It will guide you to me." Kaelin closed his fingers around the stone, moved by the gesture, by the implicit acknowledgement of potential future dangers and the trust it represented. "Thank you, Lyrene." He looked down at the strange artifact, then back at her, bathed in the soft glow of the ship's lights and her own internal luminescence. "But let's try not to get separated, okay?" Her lips curved in that rare, warm smile. "An optimal strategy." The moment of quiet connection was shattered by a piercing alarm from the newly enhanced sensor array. Kaelin swore, spinning towards the console. A single, powerful energy signature had just dropped out of orbit, descending rapidly towards the ruins. "It's not Z-Krill," Lyrene said instantly, her smile vanishing, replaced by warrior alertness. Her skin flared with sharp silver patterns. "And not the Warden's configuration." Kaelin zoomed in on the tactical display. The ship was sleek, angular, bearing the unmistakable markings of the corporate hegemony's elite enforcers, the auditors. "Auditors," he breathed, his blood running cold. "How did they find us?" The hegemony rarely ventured into uncharted space unless significant profit or a major infraction was involved. Perhaps the Z-Krill placed a bounty, Lyrene speculated, her eyes narrowed. Or the Wardens, unable to act directly outside their jurisdiction, alerted sympathetic elements within the hegemony. "Doesn't matter how," Kaelin said grimly, already strapping himself into the pilot's seat. "We need to leave. Now." Lyrene was already at the co-pilot station, her hands flying across the controls, bringing the comet's systems fully online. "Their descent vector targets this location precisely. They knew where we were." "Maybe that Zalosian tech wasn't as stealthy as we thought," Kaelin grumbled, firing the engines. The comet lifted off, dust swirling around the landing gear as they ascended rapidly out of the ruined archway. Below, the auditor ship settled onto the ground where they had been moments before, deploying heavily armed troops. Laser fire stitched the air around them as Kalen pushed the engines to their maximum, weaving through the colossal ruins towards open sky. "Shields holding," Lyrene reported, diverting power. "They're launching fighters." Two small, agile interceptors detached from the auditor vessel, streaking after them. Kalen cursed, throwing the comet into a series of gut-wrenching evasive maneuvers, using the massive Zalosian structures as cover. An energy bolt slammed into their port stabilizer, sending shudders through the frame. "We can't outrun them and fight them in atmosphere," Kalen yelled. "I need to get us to space, make the jump." "Their targeting systems are slave to the mothership sensors," Lyrene observed, analyzing the incoming fire patterns. "If we can disrupt that connection—" Her eyes took on that intense, focused look Kalen recognized from the Zekriel fight. "I have an idea. Risky, requires precise timing." "Story of our lives," Kalen muttered, dodging another volley. "What do you need?" "Fly towards the orbital rings," Lyrene instructed, pointing towards the massive, shattered structures hanging in the sky. "There are unstable gravimetric pockets near the largest fracture point, and bring us close, very close." Kalen didn't question her. He angled the ship upwards, pushing the damaged engines, the auditor fighters hot on their tail. The gigantic broken ring loomed kilometers across, its fractured edges glittering with residual energy fields. "Closer, Kalen," Lyrene urged, her own hands glowing brightly now. "Prepare for inertial G-spike on my mark." He flew them directly towards a massive crack in the ring structure, the pursuing fighters mimicking his path. Warning alarms blared as proximity sensors screamed. They were skimming meters above the jagged, crystalline surface. "Now!" Lyrene yelled. She slammed her glowing palms onto her console. A wave of pure, focused energy surged from the comet's main sensor dish, not outwards, but inwards, directly into the unstable gravimetric field of the ring's fracture. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The localized gravity warped violently. Kalen felt the ship lurch as if hit by a giant hand. Behind them, the two auditor fighters, unprepared for the sudden distortion, slammed directly into the ring structure, exploding in twin blossoms of fire. Kalen wrestled the comet back under control, pulling away from the ring as residual energy crackled around them. He stared at the debris field where the fighters had been, then looked at Lyrene in stunned silence. She was breathing heavily, the light draining from her hands, but her eyes blazed with triumph. Disrupting the localized gravity momentarily severed their targeting lock and overloaded their inertial dampeners, she explained, a touch of weariness in her voice. "A temporary solution." "Temporary is good enough," Kalen grinned, relief washing over him. He pushed the ship towards open space. "Let's get the hell out of here before the mothership decides to come up after us." As Xylos and its ancient rings dwindled behind them, Kalen reached over and squeezed Lyrene's hand. "You keep saving my ship, warrior woman." She turned her hand, lacing her fingers through his, her skin cool against his. The light under her skin pulsed softly, a warm, steady gold. "And you keep giving me reasons to," she murmured, her gaze holding his. They punched the coordinates for the nearest hyperspace jump point, leaving the graveyard of architects and the hegemony auditors behind. They were fugitives again, hunted and homeless, their future uncertain. But as the stars stretched into familiar lines, Kalen looked at Lyrene, her hand still linked with his, her presence a solid, comforting reality beside him. He wasn't alone anymore. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not out of obligation or penance, but out of the unforeseen, undeniable connection they had forged against all odds. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but suddenly, it felt like the only one worth living.